Hi, I'm Sheila Guillotin, and this is the Simsbury Woman. The Spanish philosopher George Santayana wrote that those who do not remember the past are doomed to repeat their mistakes. One of the great mistakes in human history was the Holocaust, the systematic, bureaucratic, state-sponsored persecution and murder of 6 million Jews by the Nazi regime and their collaborators. This year, our local Jewish community continued the ceremony of Holocaust Memorial Day, which has now been observed in Simsbury for the past 8 years. On Sunday, April 23rd, volunteers stood on the steps of Eno Hall, and for 24 hours, in 15-minute increments, almost 200,000 names of victims were read. My guest today is Rabbi Rebekah Goldman, who delivered the prayers offered at the memorial. In this new reality of partisan politics, which allows and even promotes the idea that insulting name-calling of anyone or any group that one may dislike is acceptable, we need to look to the past and remember that some of the worst travesties that humans have committed often begin with just words. Many mock what they call political correctness, and in the process eschew basic manners. We'll discuss today with our guest not only the accomplishments of the Simsbury woman, but because we're going to talk about her journey to become a female rabbi. We'll also talk extensively about the Simsbury Memorial. Welcome, Rabbi Bekah. Rabbi Bekah.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me today.
Oh, you're most welcome. A female rabbi is unusual. Perhaps you could give us a little bit of your background and how you came to this position.
Absolutely. So it is unusual. It's probably even more unusual to see a rabbi at all coming Louisiana.
I was going to ask you about that later. Go ahead.
Which is where I'm from, and I am the first rabbi to come out of my community in Lake Charles, Louisiana. I always knew that I wanted to be a rabbi.
Really?
Yes. So from the moment I stood up on the bima for the first time at my bat mitzvah, I just sort of knew that this was what I wanted to do. So I did all the things you have to do. I moved to Israel. I learned Hebrew. I read a ton of books, and I went through 7 years of graduate study in order to be ordained.
Wow. Okay.
A long process.
That is a long process. So in doing my research, I discovered, and I'll leave out the woman in the 1500s, but it was actually in Germany, just before the atrocities, that the first woman was actually ordained a rabbi. That sort of freaked me out.
That is what we think. That's for sure. Regina Jonas, I think.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
And then the first American was Sally Present.
Uh-huh.
And
right around, I think, the late 70s or early 80s?
1972.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about a female rabbi. For instance, I noticed people don't even seem to know exactly what to call you. So what is the proper address?
So very much like today, when you look at actors, you don't always say actresses anymore. Sort of Angelina Jolie is really we no longer call her an actress. We no longer call flight attendants stewards and stewardesses, right? It's now just flight attendants. It's now actors. So instead of calling female rabbis Rabbah, which would technically be the feminine form of rabbi, we are all just called rabbi. Or some of us choose our own titles, Rav, Rava. It just, it depends on what you feel comfortable with. I like for people just to call me Bekah.
Oh, okay. Well, that's certainly easy.
It's easy.
And I would have eliminated my rather tongue-tripping intro. Are there female rabbis in Israel? You mentioned you'd been in Israel.
There are female rabbis in Israel.
Really?
Not ordained in the more traditional movements. However, progressive Jews all over the world are ordaining female rabbis. And it's really, in fact, there were far more women than men in my rabbinical school.
Really? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Well, that one took me by surprise.
Yeah.
Now, Judaism, as I understand it, and I don't understand much, you've got the Orthodox, you've got Reform, and isn't there one other?
There are actually a dozen others.
Okay.
I guess maybe if you were to start at on one end of the spectrum, maybe humanist Jews, renewal Jews, Reconstructionist, Reform, conservative, conservadox, modern Orthodox, Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox, Hasidic. I mean, it just, any way you want to practice, you can find a denomination that works for you.
Okay. Given what a rabbi is, what does that equate to in other churches? Say, I told you I was born Roman Catholic. So what would the rabbi equate to? The priest, the bishop, the pope?
I'd say the priest.
Okay.
The priest, the reverend, the pastor, any position of clergyhood is really what we equate to. We do all of the same things. We lead services. We teach about Bible. We educate our kids and our adults in sort of a lifelong learning endeavor. We make sure that people have beautiful wedding ceremonies and meaningful funerals and everything in between, all the life cycle events, everything that you would imagine your clergy person doing, that's what rabbis do.
Did you have something equivalent to a pope?
Nope. we don't really.
You don't? Okay.
No, we don't, in fact.
And not even a bishop then?
No.
Oh, so the rabbi is it?
The rabbi's it.
Okay.
Lots of different communities belong to organizations that they are affiliated with, unions, but not every synagogue does. And in some synagogues, there is no union that they belong to and nobody sort of helping guide them in that process, which, it depends, can be good or bad.
Okay.
So
now, how did you happen to go? I know we're going to talk a little bit about you being from Louisiana because I'm still not quite sure I understand that, especially since you went, at least your final rabbinical training was in New England. How did you happen to get to Simsbury?
So my husband's actually from Rocky Hill.
Oh, okay. Well, that could explain it.
And when we were trying to decide where to go after I finished rabbinical school, we knew it had to be near family. And so we sort of drew a circle, a 30-mile radius around Rocky Hill and a 30-mile radius around New Orleans, because that's where my family is.
Really?
And that was it. We were looking for positions in those areas.
Okay, now in the Catholic Church, the bishop just sends the priest wherever he wants to go. That doesn't sound like the way it works.
There is a lengthy search process that the congregation, and if they're affiliated with the union, that the union and the congregation sort of partner in, and they interview candidates, and it doesn't work that we are assigned particular places. We go where it's the right fit. And it just so happened that Simsbury was a perfect fit for our family.
Okay, as I understand it, you were replacing a rabbi who had been in Simsbury for 30 plus years.
Yes. Absolutely. Rabbi Herman had been in this area for 36 years, and it was a phenomenal legacy that he helped create here. And I'm so honored and blessed to be able to follow after him. In fact, I email him quite frequently and say, oh goodness, Howard, what did you do in this situation? And it's been a really collaborative effort for him to be able to guide me along, and for the community to work with me in this process.
Okay. So there's no, you rush in the door and want to change everything.
Naturally, there are things that, that don't fit my personality or my style of leading. But it's institutional change in and of itself is it must be a gradual process. And there are things that I rushed in and immediately did.
Okay.
But I think that those were mistakes for me. I was failing forward. I was learning what to do, what not to do. And I think that the community has been really, really welcoming and warm and understanding, because I'm new at this and I'm new here in this area.
Sure.
So we're working on it together.
Okay. Well, anti-Semitism, which we really have to talk about, is unfortunately seems to be becoming more prolific than even when I was growing up, or maybe we just hear more about it. I would be interested in your perspective, because you have both the geographic and, of course, the theological, but the geographic perspective of what I would call the Deep South and New England, which couldn't be more diverse in terms of attitudes. Where have you seen anti-Semitism? Is it different in the South? Is it the same? What have you experienced?
So generally, I feel that anti-Semitism comes from, like I said, generally, it comes from a place of ignorance, lack of education. And so the difference between my experience with anti-Semitism in Louisiana and my experience with anti-Semitism here is that here our kids are well educated. They know the history of World War II. They know everything they could possibly need to know in order to become compassionate and kind human beings and understand what anti-Semitism looks like and what hate looks like. In the South, it looks a little different, because the education is not up to our standards up here. There are many things, even as a Jew, that I didn't learn about that were related to Judaism, anti-Semitism, the Holocaust, World War II. And I didn't learn about those things until later on in life. And so I know that the kids growing up in Louisiana, and in maybe many parts of our country, are not learning about some of these essential things that help educate them about anti-Semitism.
Well, I'm curious. I mean, for instance, one of the things that, of course, totally freaks out anyone with any education is you have Holocaust deniers. I mean, what does have you ever run into any? And what do you say to someone who even espouses that extremely silly position?
I have never actually run into someone who has been a Holocaust denier, but I think it's hard to have a conversation and get anywhere in the conversation when you don't come from the same foundation.
Sure.
And that foundation is the education in this particular instance, right? So if you don't have that same education, if they don't know all of the dates and they haven't seen the pictures and they've never met a Holocaust survivor, then how are they supposed to know? How are they supposed to believe if they've never seen it with their own eyes, if they've never experienced it? They certainly could read, but without the desire to learn about it, maybe never even having met a Jew.
Exactly.
I think that, it's hard. It's hard to have a conversation about that.
Yeah, unfortunately, that translates over into other areas these days. There was one thing I noticed. I want to get to the memorial, but there was one thing I noticed on your website that you talked about. And one of the things you talked about was promoting interfaith. Could you define interfaith for us?
Absolutely. Well, so, one would say that we're all interfaith, right? Because we were all raised in different homes, different backgrounds. Even a conservative Jew and a Reformed Jew are going to sort of be in this compromising interfaith relationship. But when we say interfaith on our website, what we mean is couples who have blended families. Someone comes from a Catholic background who has married someone who's Jewish. And that can pose a lot of challenges and a lot of problems. And what we hope to do as a community is to help those families realize that really the beauty and depth and richness of both traditions is important to value and important to teach, but we're willing to help them find a way to work on both of those and find some sort of a compromise there.
Okay. All right. I just want to let our viewers know right now that we're now going to talk a little bit about the Simsbury Holocaust Remembrance Day. And before I talk with Bekah about it, we're going to discuss, or we're going to actually show you some of the filming that we did of the event.
As we begin Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day, we remember the victims of the greatest crime of human against human. The young, the old, the innocent, the 1.5 million children, starved, shot, gassed, turned to ash, all because they were deemed guilty of the crime of being different. We remember what happens when hate takes hold of the human heart and turns it to stone. What happens when victims cry for help and there's no one listening? What happens when humanity fails to recognize that those who are not in our image are nonetheless in God's image? We remember and pay tribute to the survivors who bore witness to what happened, so that even though the victims who perished were robbed of their lives, they would not be robbed in their deaths. We remember and give thanks for the righteous of the nations who saved lives often at the risk of their own, teaching us how in the darkest night we can light a candle of hope. On Yom HaShoah, we call on you, Holy One, Spirit and Protector of the world, to help us hear your voice in every generation, saying, do not murder. Do not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. Do not oppress the stranger.
Clara Weinstein, 48, Czechoslovakia. Vaiga Weisberg, 18, Romania. Bethla Trabolowski, 40, Poland. Erzsébet Tufel, 32, Hungary. Hedwig Tusht, 25, Germany. Shandor Katz, 42, Rakovo. Esther Cohen, 49, Netherlands. Bluma Cohn, 58, Poland. Marie Cohen, 43, Greece. Roland Cohen, 22, Athens.
Naftali Mer, 37, Poland. Stefania Polak, 58, Poland. Marisa Pikowski, 43, Poland. Esther Pirovics, 30, Poland.
Philip Paper, 65, Netherlands. Bertha Plazek, 42, Poland. Melo Plazek, 45, Poland. Minha Pawilda, 48, Poland. Tauba Pristin, 68, Poland.
Now we'll talk to Bekah about it because you were the one who gave the invocation and the prayers. So first of all, tell people who don't know what exactly is the Memorial Day.
So Yom HaShoah is a day that was...
Okay.
Yom HaShoah
Thank
is
you.
Holocaust Memorial Day. Thank you for
Okay.
helping me clarify that. It was created as a way for us never to forget. And so each year we mark this day, and some synagogues do very little. They do a prayer, a moment of silence. Some synagogues, partner with larger Jewish organizations in their area, and they do 24-hour events. Some just do evening events. Some do morning events. It just really depends on the community. This particular community has chosen to spend 24 hours reading names of victims, Holocaust victims.
Now, how did this date get picked? What was the significance, or is there a significance of the April 23rd date?
This date, I believe, was the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising.
Okay.
Which was a sort of a monumental day in that these prisoners realized that they needed to do something, that they couldn't just sit around and wait to die.
Okay.
And so marking this day is a way for us to say, they didn't just do nothing. They did something. Okay. Now we're going to do something.
Okay. And I believe I read that some organization provides you with the list so that every year you actually would read different names.
So we've collected as many names as we can possibly collect so far. And I think some years our coordinators, Michael Bonchick and Jerry and Barbara Hirsch, actually have collected more names. But there are some organizations, the Holocaust Memorial Museum in D.C., Voices of Hope also has borrowed our names this year, and we hope to be able to collaborate with them in the future. But the names, we don't have all 6 million.
Oh.
But we have as many as we were able to collect. And some of them, the first names are unknown, but we know their last names, or some of them, the last names are unknown, but we know their first names.
Okay.
And so doing this, standing up there and reading these names, the list goes across the page and it's last name, first name, maybe their father's name, maybe where they're from, their age, and maybe where they died.
And these were all people who died
in the
camps. Okay.
And outside of the camps,
too.
Because there were so many situations where they weren't actually in camps, where they passed away.
Okay.
And so, when you're reading the names and you look down and you see the name of a 3-year-old, a 2-year-old, as a mother, as a parent,
sure,
it is extremely difficult. And even reading, there are names of people who were 98.
Yeah.
What?
Oh, yeah.
How we always wonder, sort of like, if you don't believe it actually happened, how can you look down at these names, and not feel something for people who, were caught in this horrific war?
The Holocaust Museum, I was reading one of, and this is a very philosophical question for you, but the Holocaust Museum talks about anti-Semitism as the longest hate, which I found very interesting. Anti-Semitism seems to predates Christianity, clearly, because the Romans. So what's the basis? I mean, every religion has somebody they hate, but why is it that the Jews always seem to, every century, there seems to be some anti-Semitism movement? You had pogroms, you had, ghettos. I mean, what is it that causes it to be so prevalent in that one religion?
That's a good question.
For which there's probably no answer.
I think that during some periods in time, it had to just be about education and how you were educating your children. Now, I don't believe that any child was born bad.
No, I don't.
And
either.
So, if you are teaching your child to hate, they're not going to know why they hate.
Yeah.
They're just going to hate.
Right.
And I think, what the Nazis did, what Hitler did was he started with the youth, right? And it started with, advertisements on TV, or not on TV, but in the newspapers, right? And so, we know that it begins with education. It begins with teaching. You have to teach people to hate. It's not an innate thing. It's a learned behavior.
You remind me of the song from South Pacific. You have to be carefully taught, and that is true. So let me ask you the ultimate impossible question.
Oh no.
Yeah. What is it that about religion, not just Judaism or Catholicism or Islam, what is it about religion that has wonderful theologic, beautiful sentiments, feed the poor, clothe the naked, and then you move from that to, and if you don't believe what I do, I'm going to go out and kill you. And it's in every religion. I mean, it seems to not just one religion against another, but even within religions. You've got the Protestants and Catholics. You've got in Islam, you've got the Shia and the Sunni. Philosophically, theologically, however you'd like to attack that, what is it about religion that causes this absurdly reactionary?
I think that it's not about the religion.
Okay.
It's about the bastardization of it.
Okay.
It's about the interpretation of it. And I think that any charismatic leader can guide a people into one direction or another, into behavior of love or behavior of hate. And so, whether it's Sunni or Shia, whether it's Catholics or Protestants or Jews, I don't actually think that it's the religion. I think it's about how people interpret that religion.
And how do you go about changing attitudes? I mean, what can people of good conscience do?
Have conversations.
Okay.
I recently saw this Facebook post, because Facebook is, I feel like Facebook is everywhere, right?
Yes.
So it was of this Muslim man and woman who were sitting on a street corner with a table and a sign that said "Free hugs and conversation."
Oh, that's interesting.
And, people were a little wary. They were like, what in the world is going on here? Why are these people offering? It's in our nature, right, to be a little skeptical. We've been taught that. Don't trust strangers, be careful. All of those things naturally make us a little wary. But the more people that started to go over and get these free hugs and have conversation and dialogue, the more people came. And by the time they had finished the day out there, they had hugged hundreds of people and had really great conversation with hundreds of people. And what I think needs to happen is that we need to put some of that skepticism behind us. We need to put that wariness, we need to put that be careful attitude, and instead say, I'm going to walk over and extend my hand to you, because no matter what you believe, we are both human beings.
Okay.
We ultimately are fighting the same fight, and that fight is to wake up in the morning, help our families make it through the day, do good work in the world, and ultimately lay down at night with a clear conscience. And of course, there are people in the world who don't want those things, but the majority of us do.
I do believe that is true. But as usual, our time is almost up, and we have barely scratched the surface of today's topic. I hope that our discussion has encouraged some serious thought and reflection. Most people are good and decent, but we have to be aware that ideologies that push us in the direction of exclusion or discrimination have to be avoided. Living in the United States, we've been given the right to think freely, to express within certain limits those thoughts in words. Our First Amendment gives us some of our most important rights: free speech, free assembly, free press, and the right to practice any religion we choose, but without the interference or directives from the government. Sometimes we forget how lucky we are to live in this country, and we fail to notice when a valued right may be slipping away. I would encourage all of our viewers, keep yourselves educated in both history and politics. Political disagreements and discussion is not only acceptable in this world, it should be encouraged, but we must be aware that without the intellectual discipline, political disagreements can easily become tyrannical partisanship. Thank you for watching, and I wish all of our viewers a happy and productive day. And thank you, Bekah.
Thank you so much.
Moshe Ginsburg, 34, USSR. Benjamin Kahn, 48, Romania. Max Feller, 44, Romania.
Unknown Weinbrett, 13, France. Nicole Cario, 10, France.
David Ruvam, USSR. David Esther, 29, USSR.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.